Jenkins mini course, module 3. Triggering test automation execution based on updates of the version of the app you're under test. So the goal of this module and this job we're going to build is to trigger our automated tests to run when they detect the version of your application under test incrementing. So we'll configure a Jenkins job that'll check the version of a web application on a regular basis, and if the version is incremented since the last time we ran the job, we'll kick off our automated tests. So what we're going to do in this example is monitor a web application or website like Stack Overflow, and you'll see on Stack Overflow, for example, right at the bottom there is a revision number for the build of the web application or website that we want to test. And what we want to do is to capture that build information, monitor it, and when we see it increment, kick off the tests. Before we can do this though, again we need to add a couple of plugins to Jenkins to give us the capability to do this, and the two plugins we need this time are the Copy Artifact plugin and the PowerShell plugin. So we'll run some PowerShell script as part of our Jenkins job in this instance. So back to the Jenkins dashboard, click on Manage Jenkins, followed by the Manage Plugins, and we'll go for the available plugins again, and we want to look for the Copy Artifact. Now we've already installed this as part of a different one, so it doesn't show up this time round. It will show up under the installed ones. So we'll want to just install in this plugin for Jenkins. We'll do an install without a restart, and you can see Copy Artifacts has already been installed, and now Jenkins is installing the PowerShell plugins. That's complete and successful. Back to the Jenkins homepage where we'll start to build out this next job. So we're going to create this job in two steps actually, because how this works is that we need to get the current version of the application under test, and then each time we need to check with the previous version that was under test. So what we want to do first is just build this job, check alt application under test version, freestyle project again, click on OK, and we'll create it initially just to capture the version of the application under test and save that to a file version.txt. So if we come down again to the build steps and we create a Windows PowerShell build step, and in here copy in the PowerShell from the email or the PDF accompanying document, and just quickly to give you an idea what this PowerShell does, first off it goes to the Stack Overflow web page and it gets the contents of that web page, the raw HTML, saves it in the content variable. We then define a regular expression that looks for that revision or version number of the application. We save that in a variable called regex. We then apply that regular expression to the content that's held in that variable, and the value that we get out is saved in the current underscore value variable. And then we echo that to the console, and that gives us the current version of the application under test. So if we look at Stack Overflow, scroll to the bottom, what it should pick out is this version ID or revision ID at the bottom of the page. So let's get that working first, and then we'll save that value to a file. So what I want you to do is to actually comment out these other lines for now. So we'll echo the current value and then we'll comment out that, and just want to make sure that we then leave this line enabled so that we send that current value to the version.txt file. So I'll comment all of that out as well. So that will create a file called version.txt, and we want to archive that file or artifact So we'll save the version.txt and save the job. And if we run that now, and view the console output for that run of the job, hopefully what we'll see is that in the console output it captured that number, that revision number, and it archived the artifact. So if we go back to the job itself, the top level, we should see that a successful artifact archive, and if we click on version.txt, it means we've stored that value in the text file. So now we have that initial version, and what we want to do now is modify the job so that it monitors and checks against this version that's stored in here. And if it changes, then alert us. If it doesn't change, just continue. So if we go back and configure this job, we need to do two things. First off, we need to add a build step that says copy the artifacts from another project. Well, actually it'll be the same project, so it'll be this project, and we want to capture the version from the previous build. So at the moment that previous build is build 1. When we run it next time, it'll be build 2. So we'll say last completed build, ignoring the build status, and the artifact we want to copy into this build is version.txt. But what's important here is, because we want to get this artifact, we need to make sure we get it before we process it. So we need to drag and drop that step above the PowerShell step. So you can click and hold on there, drag up, and it should do that copy artifacts from another project step before we try to use version.txt in this bit of the PowerShell. So now we need to uncomment some of these things. So we come in here again, so we get the content of the web page, we apply the regular expression, we save that current value to the current value variable here, we echo that to the screen. Then we want to get the previous version, so we uncomment this line, and this gets the content from version.txt, which is the file that we have obtained when we did the copy artifacts from another project, and that will be stored in previous version. Then in here we just want to echo previous version, current version, and then we do the comparison. So we can uncomment this line, the if statement, and we can uncomment the echo statement. We want to save the current version again. This time we run it through, exit, or else echo the version number has not changed. So this comparison is working like this. We diff the previous version value, so the previous run, to the current version, which is now when we're running it. And if they're different, this will result in a true condition, and we'll come in here and we'll say the version number has changed. We'll take the current version and put it into the new version.txt file, and then we'll exit with a status of 0, which is success. If the version numbers aren't different, that equates to a 0, and we do echo version number has not changed, and we mark the job as a fail. So it's important to be aware here that the job will fail if they're the same, and it will go to a success if they're different, indicating that we need to trigger our tests because the application under test has changed. Then again, post build actions, archive the artifacts, and we'll save that. So now when we build the job, it'll use the archived artifact from build 1, compare it against the version in build 2 that we've just run, and if they're the same, it will fail. If they're different, it will pass. Let's have a look at the console output, and we'll just confirm that. So we went in here, we copied the artifact from build number 1, and we're running build number 2, you can see here. We did the comparison down here, and it says the version number has not changed, marking the build as failed. And then we archive that version again into version.txt, ready for the next comparison. Now, one useful thing to know here if we want to test a condition where, or force the condition where the comparison is different, we can do that in a bit of a crafty way. You can come into the Jenkins install directory, which is Program Files Jenkins, and in the Jobs folder you'll see all of the folders in here relate to the jobs that we've created. So we've got a check application under test version, we've got a check application under test version job here, and in here is a directory with all the builds. So we've only run 2 builds so far, so we're on number 2 there. If we come into the directory, we'll see 1 and 2 builds there. So what I'm going to do is, in the archive folder where we store the version.txt value, is I'm going to force that so that it's an older version. So that Jenkins thinks we're currently running with version 3261, which is a previous version to the version that's in here. So I'm going to force this difference. So we'll save that file. So when we run build 3 in Jenkins, it will get that old version number and compare it against the latest version number from the Stack Overflow revision. And there should be a difference, and the job will move to a success status. It's indicated by blue, and if we look at the console output, and that would tell us to trigger our tests because the version of the application under test has changed. So current version 32632, previous version was 32631, and you can see here that the version number has changed. Jenkins job marked as success, and we can use that to drive a downstream job in Jenkins. Just one final thing to add on this. At the moment this is relying on us clicking the Build Now button to do that comparison, but if we come into the configuration of the job, what we'll do under the Build Triggers section is we'll say Build Periodically, and it will allow us to define a schedule here, and that schedule can be defined in a format known as cron. And if you're not familiar with cron, there's a great little website called crontab.guru, and in here you could set up your examples of schedules to work out exactly what this cron format should be. So for example in here I'm going to put 15 star 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 star, and that means at minute 15. And if we take that format, copy it into our Jenkins job, you'll see here that Jenkins is clever enough to give us examples of when it would run. So it would have last run at 1:15, next run at 2:15, so it's going to run every hour. But I know that if I stick an H/ on there, it'll run every 15 minutes within the hour. So we'll save that, and now this job will run automatically every 15 minutes. And from that we can then use that and link it to another job, a job that we'll use to trigger our test runs, which we'll follow up with in the next module.
Learn more at automatedtesting.com.